from within our team, and they're going to go through some great content. Please encourage, if you have questions, please ask it. Also, too, again, we'll have a survey at the end. So if you have any, one of the questions will be, if you'd like to have like a M365 security review as a follow-up from some of the content the team is going to share with you now, you can select there, as well as we'll share on an upcoming event we're having as well. So guys, thank you. And Saul, Randy, thank you. Turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you so much. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. And so happy and so honored to be covering Microsoft 365 security. Just like Dana mentioned, we are a designated partner with Microsoft, and security is something that I take very serious. And when you combine it with Microsoft and the offerings and the products that they offer here for our customers, there's so much to offer, so many different tools, and that's what we're going to kind of focus on today is how do we how can we bring those tools to light, under all the features that Microsoft throws at us with licensing, maybe the complexities. But really, what I want to do is just, kind of bring that to fruition and making sure that we're all educated and aware of what we can optimize within the Microsoft space. And then pass it on to Randy for an introduction here.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So thanks you for joining us. Again, Randy Kern, Director of Cloud Services. Big fancy title. What does it mean? I predominantly am working with the team on all of our architecture design for our managed services customers. To Dana's point earlier, a lot of that does evolve around the modern work, the M365 SKUs, the Azure infrastructure, laying out the groundwork, the foundations. How do we, evaluate, assess, and move in those directions? And again, core to everything that we do, security is even more prevalent than what it used to be. I've been in the industry working for Choice for a little over 16 years now, and I can tell you that the security game has only continued to ramp, and we're seeing more and more of that with things like AI in particular, kind of really accelerating that go-to and those threat vectors as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Saul, and we'll get into the meat of the content. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Randy. So yeah, as we discussed earlier, we're going to go get started now with our slides here, and hopefully everyone here is fully aware of the beautiful options that we get with Microsoft 365, the value and the different licensing schemes, and really what we want to do is, like Randy mentioned, optimize and educate the end users on what we have available for the ones that already have licensing entitled to them. We want to kind of dig into the licensing and find those hidden features on how we can provide more security, enhance the security and kind of bring AI into that mix if possible. As the AI driven threats accelerate, all we see is the gap kind of getting wider and wider with security. And the harsh reality is that, Microsoft 365, they do give you a lot of the tools, and right out of the box, we have to do a lot of the configuration ourselves. So what we want to do within this presentation is teach you or educate you on how we can configure those tools, because most of the time those tools are either not monitoring or maybe they're not connected to anything else that provide any action. So throughout this webinar, we hope to, not hopefully put anyone to sleep, but instead give us a boost and show you some practical and actionable strategies how we can close that gap. So I'm just going to go and jump to the next slide here so we can cover the agenda. A couple of the hot items we'll cover is the Threat 65 landscape, just so we can see what are we actually going up against, right? What are we facing? Then we'll kind of hover over identity and access, which is going to be the pretty much the driver when we talk about Microsoft 365. How do we see it from a password option to a zero trust framework? Then threat detection and response and recovery, right? Making sure that we have something in defense, and then the data protection, because that's what we're here for, is to protect the data and making sure we stay compliant. And again, we'll mention the licensing. What's in your license? What are you entitled to? Where are those gaps? How can we fill those gaps for you? And how can we optimize the native tools within Microsoft if we need to, or if we need to bring in any other resources or tooling to secure those gaps? That's what we're here to hopefully do. And at the end, we'll close off with any questions and any comments that you guys might have, and hopefully some next steps that we can continue on. So let's kind of start things off. Microsoft 365, it's a lot different now than what it used to be, with a lot of improvements on their security. I think they have really taking their identity and access real serious with different tools and different options that they provide. But really, I think what tells us here is that as them being the number one identity provider, they're also going to be the number one target for a lot of these threat actors, which is what's creating this gap that we talk about, right? The gap between the security we think we have and what's actually protecting us. So hopefully within the next couple of slides, we can cover some of the emerging threats so we can kind of bring light to what we're fighting up against and what we're protecting ourselves against within our landscape. And then how can we optimize the tools and licensing that Microsoft gives us to provide that depth in defense. So here, I have a couple different blocks to kind of highlight the high level attack vectors or the emerging threats that we see in trending. Identity, of course, I like to kind of start with identity to build the story, right? This is what we're here for. Identity itself is a new perimeter, right? We see identity as our validation, our verification, way of evidence to prove who we are. It's really the entity, right? Making sure that um, we protect anything behind us or our reputation is what I'm trying to say. So it's no longer about someone breaking through your firewall, right? It's about someone logging in as your CFO, right? Maybe because they stole their credentials, whether that was through a successful phishing attack, a leak credential, or maybe it was just a weak password with no MFA to back it up. It really doesn't take much nowadays. So we see a lot of business email compromise kind of booming a lot on the security space within Microsoft 365. This is where attackers no longer need to, prioritize malware or come up with sophisticated malware for that sense. Now they're just uh, looking over the internet, looking for the internet for any breach passwords or leak credentials, and taking that into their pocket and running with it, right? So they'll just log in as a user, sit in the inbox, and then they'll just wait for the right time to execute whatever payload that they need to. So again, defending the same house, but now they're kind of trying to enter through a different window. So as we can see here, the different graphics we see is the sophistication has definitely gone up dramatically, especially with AI assisted phishing campaigns. They really are doing really great with crafting personable emails. I mean, I've gotten some emails myself to my personal inbox, and they look really, really good. Really impressed. Sometimes I'm very tempted to click on it, but I have to put on my security hat and say, this doesn't look right, right? Let me question this. It's really about taking the approach of never trusting, and that's what we're going to be going into with the zero trust framework we mentioned. So, how do we go into the next step here is this is where we start talking about the zero trust, right? We start identifying the traditional security paradigm that we're used to seeing, the perimeter focused, where we're kind of protecting the edge devices. We're looking at our network, our firewalls, our endpoints. When it's no longer that same type of concept anymore. In 2026, it's really shifted to a zero trust approach, really trying to defend our identity as much as possible, right? And how Microsoft speaks about that is we want to assume breach as much as possible. We want to verify every access. We want to make sure that whatever we're dealing with or whoever we're dealing with is trusted, right? And we don't want to just grant over permissions and kind of be very loose on what users can do, what users can access. We really want to narrow down on the role-based access control as much as possible and kind of build that model around that. Because as these threats evolve with AI, and it's not always been AI. There's some really good sources or different software out there that can assist as well. But I think right now the hottest trend is AI with the cyber attacks, right? They're expanding that attack surface. They're making it a lot more complicated for a typical end user or an analyst to defend on their own. And then the regulatory demands, right? There's stricter compliance requirements now for every industry, right? Well, we're asked by any compliance frameworks to validate that we have robust data protections, right? We have validation, audit trails, demonstrate the actual security controls are in place. There's evidence that we need to provide in order to, certify ourselves as compliant to the industry and be a trusted partner in that sense. So I'm going to jump into the next slide here really quick so we can kind of see what those key security trends look like on the defense side, right? And as we see here, there's some more metrics to kind of illustrate and to speak about, right? And this is just to back up that all the numbers that we're seeing here back up what we just seen previously. Right, 80% of breaches involve compromised or weak credentials. This is an actual number that if you go ahead and Google, it's going to pop up in multiple sources. This is not just Microsoft. This is a variation of different security providers or different identity providers in that sense, because it's no longer about, exploits or 0 days. The trend now is identity, right? It's someone's password. That's the key that's being found to access your home, right? To access the back door. Once that phishing email lands on someone's inbox and they click it, attackers then have credentials, and the block here on the left side illustrates how fast the attacker has time to, compromise the account and access those credentials, which is typically less than an hour. That sophistication speaks volume. So the good news here is that organizations that adopt zero trust and that framework that it backs up does lower the breach cost, right, by 30%. That makes a big difference for a lot of these corporations that don't want to pay that additional fee or that huge burden of a budget to recover from a compromise or better yet a breach or a reputation for their business, right? So and then why since one thing that I look at is as the attackers optimize AI, utilize AI, who's to say that the defenders can't use AI? And I think that's where Microsoft as well will help us kind of bring light to that with things like Security Copilot, and then their machine learning and analytics built into some of their defender components, and then of course their identity and threat protection that we'll be discussing. So. The framework works when it's actually implemented. That's the big story around it. This is why we're having the conversation is to kind of educate what does that zero trust framework look like? How can we optimize it with the licensing we have? And if not, how can we have choice assist us with discovering that capability? All right, so I'm going to jump into the other slide, and of course, it all starts with identity and access, right? That now that we're covering well, now that we've covered the threat landscape, now we can start to build our wall up, right? We want to look at the attack vector being identity and access, right? It's your first line of defense, and it's your most commonly exploited one. Why? Because it's human, right? It's a human in the middle, or it's a human that has to kind of think with emotion and logic and sense. And it's easy for us to be susceptible to these type of attacks because they're crafted so well by AI, right? And that's why it was so important to cover that first portion is to kind of build that story. But securing Microsoft 365 is no longer a technical exercise. I believe it's a business necessity, right? It's no longer a world where attackers are simply scanning for your open ports, right? Or the exposed servers, though they still do that. But I think the money in the bank comes from the identity portion, right? The perimeter is the identity portion, and that's what we're here to cover. And identity and access, doesn't sound as technical, but it could sound very technical. But it does align with a lot of the other security frameworks, like the CIA, right? You have your confidentiality, right? You have your AAA frameworks with authentication, authorization, and accountability policy frameworks. All of these are the core, right, of identity access. Uh, at the end of the day, it really just means one thing: trust, right? Making sure that you're trusted, making sure that you have some form of validation, verification, and we're asking questions like, "Who are you?" Right? Basic questions. How do we verify that you are who you are? And should you have access to this platform, to this application, to this piece of data, right? So, like I said previously, attackers don't need to break into your house if they can borrow the keys, right? That's what stems from social engineering and these sophisticated phishing attacks. right? Or better yet, MFA fatigue being another one, right? If you're not using the strongest form of MFA, right? We're starting to see Microsoft kind of pushes towards a direction of authentication strengths, making sure that we're now identifying the legacy forms of MFA and how can we migrate to a stronger form of MFA to ensure that, these phishing attacks are no longer a problem, and now we have a phishing resistant mechanism in place. So I just want to kind of let that settle in before we start jumping into some numbers and some statistics, but then also some examples of what the authentication looks like on the identity and access side. So the next slide here is just another highlight, right? I really want to bring this number because I think this number kind of speaks a lot. 80% of breaches involve compromised credentials or phishing. It's funny, I actually not too long ago just got off of a call with this same scenario, right? This was today actually. It did involve either a compromised credential and it could have been related to a breach. It could have been related to an end user clicking on an email or phishing email, whatever the case may be. But at the same time, these breaches are becoming very sophisticated, right? They're targeting MF. They know that MFA is in place, but they're taking their chances on the type of MFA that's in place, and that's where your SMS-based MFA or voice or push to approve MFA methods really work in favor for these threat actors, the sophisticated threat actors, especially with combination of an AI assistant on the back end, which can be, these forms of MFA is what allows the threat actors to intercept your text messages, right? Or to provide MFA fatigue, right? When you start getting prompted for multi-factor authentication prompts at, I don't know, midnight or 2 a.m., or maybe it's 7 in the morning and you're just waking up and you're starting to see approve, approve, approve. And, you're hitting no at most of the time, but then another one pops up and you accidentally, sneeze or whatever the case may be, and you hit yes. Now the threat actor is in there and you've been a victim of the MFA fatigue attack. It's a real thing. It's quite scary, but there's definitely ways and methods to prevent that. And we're going to go through the different methods that Microsoft themselves provide us within that identity space. So this is going to be a good illustration. I really tried to simplify this as much as possible. I mean, there's different sources that I've gathered this data from, and really what this is saying is, um, you know, right now at the moment, you have three versions of authentication strengths, right? As you classify them. Um, there is a good, a better, and there's a best, right? And and this is not to knock on any of the other ones because at the end of the day, the good is better than nothing. That's how I look at it. I'd rather have you have some form of MFA in place, whether it's SMS versus having no MFA, because at that point, it's pretty much all options are open for the threat actor to target that account. So, as we just established, the 80% of breaches come down to credentials. We're lucky to have Microsoft provide, solid native protection options with the use of MFA, whether it's through security defaults or conditional access policies, where we can get pretty granular and customize the different methods. But the uncomfortable reality is that simply enabling SMS MFA as an option or the priority is no longer enough in 2026 because the threat actors are starting to catch on to that trend, and they're looking for methods to just hit you with MFA fatigue or SIM swapping, whatever the case may be, to take advantage of that form of MFA. And another thing I want to highlight as we covered through these three methods is on the left, right? If we kind of bring it, is password plus MFA, SMS MFA. It's better than nothing, but still vulnerable to modern social engineering attacks or tactics. As I stated before, and I've done kind of enough research on the Microsoft side, is they are trying to push us towards the middle portion, which is the Microsoft Authenticator with number matching. I think that's going to be a huge shift that Microsoft is trying to push a lot of our users and their users in the direction. Um, Why? Because, well, it's their Microsoft Authenticator with number matching. It has many capabilities, whether it's a passwordless sign-in capability, which is pretty sweet. It's phishing resistance. It adds context to every prompt. So you're no longer just hitting yes or no. You're now seeing where the prompt is coming from. You're seeing what application you're getting access to. And then it gives the end user a little bit more information to make that determination if they should approve or not. And then they have to obviously put in the number of that prompt if that's truly them who's logging in. The cool thing about this is that it's included in Business Premium, which in my opinion is it's kind of the sweet spot for a lot of SMBs. Uh, Implementation and adoption is quite simple for the Microsoft Authenticator, especially if we have new users, new hires. It's a lot easier to enroll them within that registration campaign with MFA Authenticator within Microsoft being the first method. I believe they're also starting to push Microsoft Authenticator as being kind of enforced at some point to be one of the authentication methods. But I don't think they're fully enforcing that yet at the moment. And on the right side, we have the best option, right? This is for the right highly regulated um, industries, or maybe you're not a highly regulated, maybe you just are a security whiz like myself, and I just want to be highly secure, and I want to make sure that no one can get to my computer unless it's myself, not even, my relatives or anything like that. That's the best option, right? That's you're looking at your Windows Hello, your 502 security keys, right? Fully passwordless, right? There's high standards. There's no shared secrets, no codes to intercept, no approval prompts to spam you. This is truly the gold standard, and I believe this is where the industry is moving, especially in 2026. And I think that kind of speaks a lot to the middle box there, where Microsoft Authenticator is trying to implement the passwordless sign-in capabilities, trying to get the end user to see, okay, I see I don't have to type a password any longer. I just have to put this number matching in there. It makes the end user a lot more convenient for them to log in. So I really like what they're doing on the authentication strengths. So again, we'll cover how do we implement these different methods and different strengths levels. Before we do that, I want to go and kind of talk about the security defaults portion, because that's another capability here that we want to talk about before we jump into conditional access. So security defaults, this is your starting point. Many corporations, many organizations by default have this if you're a newer tenant. I just learned this not too long ago, but it looks like Microsoft enables security defaults for a lot of the newer tenants. And what it does is, I mean, it's really solid. I think it's the baseline protection, enables with one switch, and it turns MFA on by default, right? And it's there to, block legacy authentication. In my opinion, it's way better than nothing, right? The only caveat here is that you can't really use security defaults with conditional access, right? It's either one or the other. And if you want more control, if you want more customization, more granularity on how users behave or have access to your applications and data, then we'll be talking about conditional access, which is that next step there.
One thing, Saul, while you're on this, one of the things Saul pointed out, but he didn't kind of, really get into it. Like again, newer tenants have this turned on by default. Older tenants did not. So if you've been an M365 or 65 customer for a extended period of time, and if you haven't ever gone out and just flipped the box for security defaults, those settings and those security measures aren't in place today. And so that's one of the things, again, just kind of helping to educate and illustrate the capabilities that are there that may not be turned on today. If you take away nothing else from this today, if you're not doing conditional access, you're not doing other security things, go check and see if security defaults are on. If they're not, I highly suggest you get a change window and make that change. At a minimum, obviously, conditional access, some of the things we're going to talk about are obviously the next iteration of that security evolution journey. But at a minimum, we want to ensure that our customers are running with at least security defaults, a kind of an initial baseline. Again, it's good, not better, may not be best, but it's at least a place to get us all starting from on that same security journey. So, sorry, Saul, go ahead and turn it back over to you, sir.
Thank you, Randy. All right, so I'll actually jump into conditional access now. That's the next phase, like Randy mentioned. If you're not on the security defaults front end, we can definitely assist you and have some conversations on how we get that enabled for our older tenants out there, and then transition to hopefully something like conditional access because you might already have entitlements and probably not aware at the moment. So here, conditional access, this is probably my favorite slide out of all of them because uh, I love conditional access. It's probably the most I want to say it's the highest leverage security control in Microsoft 365. This is what drives your whole identity and access and your zero trust framework. This is the engine, right? This is the engine that sits in front of every login and makes the logic, right? Builds conditions. And should this person be logged in right now? The analogy I like to illustrate is think about, a good bouncer that works outside of a venue. You have a bad bouncer. He just checks whether you have a pulse or if you're alive or you're able to walk, and he waves you through, right? Now, if you have a great bouncer, hopefully, he's running a mental checklist in real time. Is this person on the list? Are they dressed right? Do they seem off tonight? Have they been to multiple venues already, and maybe they just are not stable enough, right? It's the same person that we're dealing with, but it's the same ID, but different decisions based on the context. And that's solely how conditional access works. It doesn't just validate a password, right? It evaluates who you are, what device you're using, where you're logging in from, what risk signals exist in real time, and then it makes that decision or that determination if it should be allowed, should it challenge it, maybe a step up of MFA, some additional verification, or do we just cut them off and block them entirely? And what I wanted to illustrate here, without having too much of a fine text with a real conditional access, is just a simple sample policy that we kind of encourage a lot of our customers to implement as we see a lot of the geo fencing attacks in place, right? The geo block example on the right is probably the simplest version of this, right? And it's probably the most effective as well. If anyone has ever, maybe any of you have logged into your Entra tenant and just scattered around the sign-in logs and decided to be nosy one day, and if you look at those entries there, you'll see a lot of attacks coming from outside the U.S. It's not ironic. It's not a coincidence. This is a strategic attack tactic from all over the world that threat actors try to optimize, whether they're hiding behind a VPN or whether they're, actually in a different country. This is what we're seeing, and this is where conditional access, kind of values itself at the highest level. But the sample policy here is, providing a geo block policy we only sign in where we only allow sign-ins from within the US, or in reverse, we block the access from outside the US. And then what it does is eliminate the entire category for any foreign origin attacks, right? It's a simple policy we put in place. And of course, there's exclusions and there's exceptions that we can build around there, some logic if we want to maybe have some users that are working, outside the US. Maybe we have some users that are traveling. We can definitely make some exceptions around that conditional access to still provide them the access that they need, but maybe we want to provide a challenge for them to at least validate that that's who they are. And again, that number there, we've seen that number a lot, that 80%, it does decrease the account takeover, especially after implement something like conditional access policy like the one listed above.
Yeah, so this is kind of the foundation of what when Microsoft starts talking about modern work, this is kind of the core security foundation that's built on, and this goes across all the product suites. So whether it be Azure, whether it be M365, SharePoint, OneDrive, even into Intune, this is kind of the foundational policy. And as you leverage this into Intune, we can now start to evaluate even like end device context and states as well. Again, is it a company-owned device? Is it not a company-owned device? Does it have BitLocker encryption? So there's a number of things we can really get granular and put the controls around when we go into conditional access policy. This is really the major control piece that if you're not familiar with, or if you're not leveraging, you're going to want to definitely work with somebody to get these pieces engaged. This is really, again, turning that security dial up, from maybe 2 or 3 to 7, right? This is really going to help us from that aspect. One thing I will state is that this is included with business premium and above licensing. If you're below that, if you have an Entra ID P1, it will activate it. What I have seen a lot of customers do is purchase a single Entra ID P1 because it enables the conditional access across the entire tenant. However, that is an auditable Microsoft finding that if you are licensed in that way, please come have a conversation with us because you're asking for Microsoft to come do an audit and then fine you for all those users conditional access policies apply to. So just a quick takeaway in addition to the geo block there. Again, that's one again, if you are on conditional access policies, see if you have that in place. That's a huge differentiator as well. So thank you, Saul. Go ahead.
Thank you, Randy. Well, that's a perfect way to segue into the next slide, actually. It's what's included in your license, right? Let's look at this matrix without making anything very complex. Every time I look at licensing from Microsoft, I feel dizzy at times because there's so many different hidden features that we're not aware about. This includes in here, this is requires an add-on. What I really wanted to build here is the three components that we're probably going to be identifying as business premium, E3, and E5 licensing, and then bring out some of those core components we talked about, like conditional access, right? The step up of Entra ID P2, which is focused on identity protection with, privilege identity management and governance. Then we have the Defender for Business. So all of these features here, and then I'm trying to tie in which one do I have, right? So Business Premium, as you can see, is pretty solid on the security side for a lot of our small, medium business customers. The only caveat, it does cap out at 300 licenses, but in most cases, most of our clients fall in well under that bucket. So to be able to have them optimize business premium, they already have P1, and like Randy said, they won't have to worry about Microsoft coming down and hunting them for any non-compliant users or anything like that. So it's a good way to avoid that. And then Defender for Business, of course, you want to have some security on the most targeted vector when it comes to your end user, which is email, right? You want to make sure that you have Defender for Business, Defender for Office 365. That covers your Defender for Endpoint for the Intune enrolled devices. You have your Defender for Office 365, which is email security. And then you have some compliance as well with governance, with the sensitivity labels, with data protection, data loss prevention. And then at the end, you also get Intune, which is to me pretty sweet. The fact that you get all of these different features under Business Premium. I'm not trying to sell you on Business Premium itself, but I think after reviewing it, I was thinking to myself, wow, this is a solid licensing for Microsoft to offer with a lot of security features, and for them to just kind of be pretty flexible on Intune as well, really centralizes how we can optimize that. And then we have E3. This one's a good one to talk about, and I'm pretty sure, and I'm more than happy to have Randy jump in here because as I went through this license, a lot of the time, what I've started to see is E3. It does cost nearly as double as business premium, and a lot of our clients might think, including myself, I thought it'd be more secure. It's actually not. E3 to me is actually a more productivity and compliance focused license, though it does have some security components in there. It does remove a huge component, which is that Defender for Office 365, which, of course, that's a huge gap there that we need to fill in to make sure that our end users are protected.
Yeah.
Randy, if you want to jump in there and chat about that one.
Yep. So exactly from that perspective, I think there's a question here as well. F3 licenses, I believe the F3 are equivalent to the E3 in terms of feature set and capability, but we can follow up on that as well. But from a feature set perspective, the E3 is a lower security SKU, which is again most people wouldn't think that. And so when we start talking about going to an E3, if you've been on Business Premium, and again most of the advice from what we see in terms of optimizing your security, your Microsoft investment is you maximize your business premium users, and then you start looking to leverage the E3 or the E5. And in a lot of cases, by the time we evaluate the security context and everything else is there, we usually end up recommending by the time you add on the security features to get equivalent for the business premium, you're almost to an E5 anyway. And so typically we will look at the E3, but typically when you hit that 300 threshold for business premium, we start looking at, okay, who are your top targets, right? And as we kind of alluded to, that's going to be your executives teams, like your CEOs, your CFOs, your CIOs, your accounting department, right? Those are the ones they're going after for those phishing attacks where they can get in, they can make wire transfers, they can make money, they can really have, an impact on your business, and they have most opportunity to maybe make a profit out of it, which is ultimately at the end of the day what they're always after. So when we start looking at going to an E3, we have to start adding some of the security bundle add-ons to get equivalent coverage. And at that point, typically a lot of times we're pretty close to an E5, and the E5 really does bring all the bells and whistles to play that we can really, more robustly secure those most critical accounts. And so that's where we start breaking out those users into what are the most critical user groups. Let's put those in the E5s. Then let's look at business premium for the rest of the users that we can cover. And then for those that we can't cover in that combination, then we look at E3s in combination if that's still a little bit cheaper from that aspect. So that's kind of how we would handle those licenses from that aspect. We do have another question that I think I would like to see if you can answer quickly, Saul, that came in live, and that is specifically what would be a proper way to make exceptions for geo-blocking for non-US policies? For example, someone goes on vacation to Mexico and wants to get on their email. So you just speak to that just a little bit in terms of kind of, how we would do that, what that takes, just high level steps, and then we can always follow up with more details later.
Absolutely. So actually, we do have an internal policy for travel. One thing we do is create a group in Entra. We solely call it an international travel group, and what we do is we add them into the exclusion for the international or the geo blocking fencing. And what we'll do is we'll actually require that user to provide a step up of MFA. With that. So if they are traveling from a new location and we want to validate that that's who they are, we can put them into a group and require them to provide a different authentication strength. And that's either using the Microsoft Authenticator app or maybe having them use a stronger form of MFA like the phishing resistant. So again, it's a lot easier to demonstrate with maybe, the actual policy drawn up. But again, really happy to just jump on and show you how that looks and how that works.
Thanks, all.
Of course. All right. So I think we covered the licensing. Randy, I think you've covered most of it. The E5s, again, it's the full stack, right? Nothing held back. You get all the bells and whistles. Of course, it's a little bit more costly, but as Randy mentioned, by the time you look at E3 and bundles and add-ons, you're more than likely just better off just getting E5. So let me go ahead and just jump into the next slide here where we can identify some of those gaps that we were talking about. So as we see these different these different tiles here for business premium E3 and E5, I kind of wanted to highlight the gaps, the native gaps, and none of them are really on the negative side. Honestly, a lot of them don't need to be looked at in a negative sense. They're really just to bring some highlight to it, right? Because at the end of the day, these are probably components that either are already secure enough, depending on your sizing, or maybe there's other tools that can fill in those gaps for you. So on the left side, we have business premium, right? Robust security foundation for SMBs. And then you have your licensing with rich security functionality, right? And as listed on the screens, some advanced threat response capabilities require higher licensing, but that's okay because at the end of the day, there's other resources and other tools that we can provide solutions for. The E3 itself, and then another thing, of course, like Randy mentioned, is the 300 cap of users. So once you reach that 300 cap, you start looking at migrating some of those targeted users over to your E5s if need to. E3 was built for larger enterprises. I like to look at it as larger enterprises who do have dedicated IT staff, right? They are the ones that have additional tools to layer in. But without the expertise, those gaps are invisible unless something actually goes wrong, which speaks to, the email Defender for Office 365 component not being there. We'll fill in how we can fill in those gaps for you. And then we got what I call, again, the full stack, nothing held back. The only caveat for this license is that if you don't have the security expertise in-house, right, to operate that functionality, more than likely you'll be missing on a full potential of those features. So most of those features do go unused without a dedicated security team. And again, Security Copilot does help, but it is an AI agent and it's basically built for an analyst to enhance their capabilities. So it's not there for a replacement. Instead, it's there for the AI analyst to kind of take themselves to the next level and optimize AI in a good sense. So yeah, at the end of the day, right, the gap isn't just about features or what's included or what's missing. Every tier is missing something or some capability. And at the end of the day, if you look at all these, they're also kind of missing that active monitoring, that human in the loop to monitor and watch your tenant. That's the gap that we're going to kind of transition over to with threat detection and response soon. All right. So Here we're going to start jumping into threat detection and response. I'll try to speed things up here so we can get through all the
One
slides.
second, real quick. So
Yep.
just to illustrate, and I apologize, guys, I did get a chance to go back and look real quick. Comparing the F3 to the E3 that I mentioned earlier, there are actual gaps between those two SKUs. So they are not identical to the E3. They're similar, but there are some security gaps in that. So I posted that in the Q&A, but also post a link in chat for the Microsoft Maps, which is a great way to evaluate licensing. It's a tool that's maintained by, I think, a third party separate from Microsoft, but it's a great way to compare licensing and inclusions. So I dropped it in the chat. Hang on. We do it to all participants here. I apologize. Nope, maybe I can't. So I don't know. We'll see if we get that link out, guys, to everybody. But again, that's a great article that you can reference specifically what those accounts do include or don't include. But again, always happy to have a conversation on that with anyone who's interested and want to make sure they're getting the proper coverage across those licenses. So go ahead, Saul.
Perfect. Thank you, Randy. All right, so threat detection and response. I like to think of threat detection and response in three different layers, right? We might have a good lock on the door, whether it's MFA or conditional access. Detection is the smoke detector alarm in your home when smoke appears, and then response is the sprinkler system that puts the fire out before it spreads and burns everything down, right? That's how I look at it. So most of our organizations do have the lock in place. Very few have all three, and at best, they're all working together. And that's what we're covered through this section, just to make sure that we kind of educate ourselves on how we can leverage those solutions there. So natively, Microsoft does offer Defender, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint plans, Plan 1 and Plan 2. And as a security operator myself, I will give credit to the huge improvements that Microsoft Defender has been doing on their product, essentially managed solution, unified detection, enhanced end user behavior analytics, and then some of the automated capabilities and threat hunting when we start to kind of climb up that tier with the Plan 2. So, automated responses using tools such as playbooks and redundant alerts to reduce workloads. These are the things that kind of take our security posture to the next level, but also making sure that we have a flexible team to, optimize other things that they need to do. And that's where Copilot for Security might also fill in some of the gaps, right? This has started some real hype around its agentic mechanisms and automated remediation capabilities. But again, as mentioned before, the catch here is that you still need an analyst to configure Copilot for security, right? This is not a plug it in and Copilot does everything for you. You still need a human in the loop to kind of configure that component and make sure that it's actually working in your favor for your tenant. So let me go into the next slide here as we kind of are crunching down on time. All right, so automated response, right? Speed is everything. Automation, AI, this is a new trend. What do we want to see when we talk about automation and response, right? Uh, we want to make sure we break these into three different sectors, right? Isolate, investigate, and recover. Same concept for any security endpoint out there is to make sure that we always isolate the endpoint or the identity, right? It's the most critical one at that point. If you identify a threat and you contain that threat, then that prevents a single compromised account from becoming a full breach, right? Then you have your investigation. Number of times I've had to hop on calls with my security team here, and we're building different log components. We're connecting different data sources and trying to build a story on how this all happened. How did we prevent? How can we prevent it? And the story here is that it can take hours, but if you have something that can, auto aggregate those data sources, it really does reduce that time punch and speeds up the next phase, which is recovery. So having something like a full detailed report with the what, the who, and the who, the when, and the where, all in one page, and providing full guided remediation steps is really, really what provides that leverage for ourselves on the security front, on the defense side, to really provide either a recovery plan, but also the end user getting back to their typical workday. And then the native Microsoft tooling to provide some of these capabilities, of course, the automated remediations, which does come up with that higher tier Defender for Endpoint Plan 2. But then you have other sources like Huntress, which we'll talk about soon. This is why we leverage Huntress in our tool stack, is because it does provide it provides every single one of these three tiers or three components on the screen. where we provide MDR automated remediations, and then also touches ITDR to make sure that our M365 identities are protected and monitored actively by an actual human in the loop. Okay. Oh, what does that look like on the Huntress or on the choice security stack, right? There's different tiers, and hopefully I don't give anyone a headache having to, read from right to left on this one. But the different tiers as we build on here is tier one, right? If we start to build from a foundation point, we have Microsoft, right? We have your Defender components. Given that you have your business premium or maybe an add-on, you have Enter ID, you have Intune, you have Purview, you have all of your core Microsoft applications living in one place. But we want to make sure we have some type of standardized configuration, right? This is where tools like Nerdio, right, might be able to provide a baseline configuration, and then we can kind of build onto the next tier, which is adding some additional resources or additional tooling to really enhance our security posture. This is the tier two, right? This is Huntress, MDR. You have your security awareness training because, of course, nope, you're not going to get as many alerts if you educate the front line, right? If you educate your end users on being very, thoughtful before they click on anything, or kind of questioning things that they receive in their inbox, or maybe you're downloading some type of software. If they have that doubt in their mind because they've watched security awareness training or whatever campaigns you might be having, then they're going to be more cautious about those actions being driven. The cool thing about Huntress is that they are 24/7 SOC, so they are actual analysts, highly trained analysts that are monitoring your M365 from the ITDR side and the MDR side. So you're fully covered for that stack there. And you start to climb up to the tier three, which is kind of bringing some of the email security, advanced email security, I should say, that kind of goes beyond what Defender for Office 365 does, right? And what it provides natively. That's where we fill in those gaps for some of our E3 customers, right? Some of our E3 customers that want to kind of really enhance their email security. They kind of highlight on impersonation defense, email DLP, outbound encryption, because at the end of the day, email is still that number one attack vector for the identity space. This is that layer that catches, what gets through the front door. Now we're at the tier four, right? Where we're fully zero trusted all around. This is where most of your security team can sleep at night, right? They don't have to stay up late and wonder if everything's configured right, or if we're going to be on another call, or did someone click on something. All right, you have your endpoint zero trust. You start looking at things like Threat Locker, where this is a application allow listing, right? This is a huge thing where if it's not trusted, right? If it's not something that we approve for our environment to run, then it's just not going to be allowed to even execute, right? If it's not approved, an approved application, and then it's not going to be installed by the typical end user, right? So Threat Locker answers that in a simple fashion, right? If we don't approve it, it doesn't run, period. And then it's a fundamentally different posture than trying to detect and block everything. It's more of just taking that preventative measure. Of course, you putting your SIEM in place, your backups for DR recovery, and then your Enter ID P2 when you start looking at identity protection, focused more on risky based sign-ins. You have your lifecycle management, your identity lifecycle management and governance, and so forth. So as we look at these tiers, I don't want to look at them as a package that you all buy at once. I think they're more of a roadmap that you kind of build at your own pace. Every organization starts somewhere, and that's fine. It's different. And some clients, say they just want to look at Microsoft. So we'll start Microsoft tier one, and then we kind of build from there and fill in those gaps as we see. All right, and then now we're at the Huntress MDR or M365 ITDR, right? This is where Microsoft provides the locks, the alarms, and the surveillance systems, but then Huntress is that security team that actively watches and monitors and responds when those alarms trigger, right? What is a watch? Risky behavior. So if you have a gap with licensing on the Microsoft side, maybe you don't have the P2 licensing to prevent, risk-based sign-ins. Well, there is Huntress there that you can optimize and detect, impossible travel or anonymous logins, right? You have intra ID configurations, right? Rogue applications, right? Making sure that there's no app abuse or uh, um, unapproved applications running or unapproved consent being granted by your end users. And of course, business email compromise. What you do get is a 24/7 SOC team really expanding that security security footprint on your organization. The cool thing about Huntress is they do make everything in an easy to read fashion with their plain language incident reports. Anyone can read through that and find the story and understand what's going on. And then you have your SIEM log aggregation, right? This is where all your analysts were kind of building on a call and trying to put different data sources together. Well, now you have your SIEM that provides that and also provides even reports in relation to that. Of course, audit trail for compliance. And then who do we target or who do we want to provide the Hunter's IDDR functionality for? In my opinion, I think everyone should have it. I think it's a huge improvement in your security posture to have another team and expand that to monitor your identity space. But ideally, it's for organizations without a dedicated security team or maybe some general IT generalists just managing M365 without a deep security foundation or any business just needing, a SOC level coverage for whatever capability it might be. And then we are jumping into why is it that ITDR is so important into a business in the first place, right? What drives these threat actors to pursue their goals to compromise our accounts? The short and sweet answer is data, right? At the end of the day, data is money. Data is valuable. It's the monetary target there, and your M365 tenant is a treasure chest, right? It's basically your emails, your contracts, your financial records. It's your reputation, right? That is it's very valuable for the threat actor, whether it's sold, whether it's ransomed, or whether it's used to commit fraud. Most businesses, sadly, don't know where all their data or their sensitive data lives. It could be scattered across SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, whatever it is. If you can't protect what you can't see, it's kind of what I wanted to take from it is you can't protect what you can't see. And to top that now, a lot of the compliance frameworks, whether it's HIPAA, whether PCI, a lot of our cyber insurance requirements are demanding that we have some type of control over our sensitive data. So I'll jump into the next slide here and let's just break down the native, again, bring in the native solutions and then what we can do to enhance those protections with our data. So the cool thing about the Microsoft side is and sensitivity labels, you classify some of your sensitive data. You can also protect it with encryption. You provide watermarks and access controls, really having control over what's yours and providing access to the users that do need it. Then you have things like Purview DLP, which comes in the fashion of either a business premium add-on on its own SKU, or you have your E5 licensing. Again, that's the E5 license that gives you everything that you need, where you can optimize data loss prevention and you can block, certain sensitive information from that perspective within your Microsoft suite. Now, if you're looking for something more enhanced, right, if you want to take it to another level and you probably have a gap in licensing, again, Proofpoint comes in for the email DLP, right? They have that advanced analytic background to provide encryption on send, right? Monitor outbound visibility, and then you have your Defender for Office 365, which is what doesn't provide all those functionalities that Proofpoint does. And that's kind of in comparison what I was trying to say here is it does close that gap for regulated industries that need to kind of take that tier up with encryption on their email and data protection. And then you have Threat Locker storage control. This one's an interesting one. This is where Threat Locker does allow, robust controls over, peripherals like USB, right? Exfiltration, making sure that your devices that are running in your environment that have Threat Locker installed are not able to get, compromised by a rogue USB device, right? Making sure that the end user is not able to exfiltrate any data from your organization. But if you have a lot of these in place already, then a lot of this a lot of the data might already be protected behind either Intune configuration policies, or if you have other controls in place to protect it with either sensitivity labels and Purview. And then there we go here on the next slide is the insider risk management with Purview. I did want to kind of highlight this for the higher tier licensing is to think of your organization as a bucket. Your data is your data and your data is what fills that bucket up, right? The Microsoft Purview DLP helps identify and seal the holes in the bucket, preventing sensitive information from leaking out. Kind of went crazy on the analogies today, but I really just want to build a story or some type of illustration on what that means, right? What does it mean to have insider risk, right? And how do we protect the data? A lot of the time, insider risk are not malicious, right? Intentionally. Sometimes it's accidental from oversharing or maybe misconfiguration on permissions. But the point is here is to put something in place with the capabilities that Microsoft has to offer with DLP and their functionality. So, insider risk manages for who might be, making attempts to share new data. But at the times, it's not always a bad actor. A lot of the time, it's just an employee just accidentally clicking or trying to share a link or a file outside. So it's about having proactive data protection and not having a reactive cleanup.
So on that
Cool.
note, while you're moving
Yep.
forward there, so one of the other things we do from a data protection perspective is really looking at partnerships with solutions like Assured Data Protection, where we're actually backing up and protecting and giving you granular restore coverage, so you're not subjective to just the Microsoft backup and restore. And that those backups and restore coverage includes your SharePoint, your OneDrive, and your M365. So it's a key part of our kind of M365 management suite when we talk about doing managed services and solutions to our customer base that we're having conversations on a regular basis as well. That kind of ties into that DLP and just data protection and recovery aspect in terms of this section.
Thanks, Randy. And almost wrapping things up here, right? It's wrapping things up on the compliance side. It's, since we're talking about data, right? We want to make sure that we emphasize on those native tools and how we can protect our different industries, whether it's HIPAA, finance or GDPR, right? This is the components that Microsoft has to offer, and then alongside other sources that we might have, like Randy just mentioned, Assure data protection and so forth. And here, last one of the last slides is, how does choice standardize security, right? What do we do? How do we configure this, right? We're really, really emphasizing on the left side, in our house expertise. These are practical solutions that we practice every day, whether we're implementing conditional access, Intune baselines. Within those Intune baselines, optimizing Nerdio, we have, configurations with BitLocker, local administrative privileges, Defender for Endpoint. I mean, the list can go on and on. But then we also build out all audit logging and automated remediations for your environment. That way, there's some self-correcting where possible, and then reducing the workload. And on the right side is where our managed services really enables tools like Nerdio, right? And then we optimize those tools to provide some standardized consistency. Because the challenge with security at scale is the consistency, right? One misconfigured device or a new employee who slips through onboarding can create a gap. In other words, another hole in that bucket that we just talked about. So with Nerdio, we're able to deploy a standardized baseline across your environment and maintain it. Every machine, every user, same security posture, and so forth from that aspect. Of course, another thing we like to highlight is the licensing optimization. Randy's huge. I think he has one of the most brilliant minds when it comes to licensing. If we ever have any questions on licensing, I usually kind of defer to Randy, and he kind of inspires me to go and do my own research as well. So, any questions you might have on licensing, you already noticed, he went ahead and dug for the F3 and E3 comparisons. Always ask him any questions when it comes to licensing, of course. And that's about it. Almost here. Just so one more slide here. We have the how choice helps your M365 security. Again, just reemphasizing on things that we're here to cover, right? We want to make sure we provide an assessment for you if we can. We want to look at your security score and review it together. The licensing and entitled optimization, reviewing the gaps, really just covering the 5 risk priorities and providing some type of roadmap, right? Because we can't just fix everything on one click. It's about having that vision to look forward and also be strategic and not provide any complexity to the business because we don't want any downtime. And then we deploy, right? How do we deploy the solutions that we just provided for you, whether it's conditional access, whether it's a Nerdio solution or Huntress, whatever the component may be, we really want to make sure that we bring some light to those different tools and how we can provide some better posture overall. And then, of course, having the monitor and response in place. So that way it's continuously monitoring, but then you also have reports and some auditing and evidence for, your compliance frameworks that you need to abide by. And I believe that's about it. Finished off.
If you'll go ahead and advance the slide for me quick there, Saul, we're going to hit a couple
Yeah.
just quick wrap ups. So again, here's kind of the key takeaways we want you to kind of walk away with. I'll give you a couple seconds to look at that. And again, it'll be in the recording. It'll go out as well, but just so you guys are aware of those. Again, just take some time, reach out to us. We're here to help, and we'd love to help you ensure that you are not one of the statistics, and we can help you prevent being a news story. So if you'll advance again for me real quick. Thank you. So kind of again, kind of where is the conclusion on this? Again, identity is the perimeter. Obviously, as we talked about, layering your defense posture, that's key for any security strategy. And then standardization is a big part of it too, that we bring through some of the tools we can do consistency across multiple customers, tenants, and configurations. So, and if you rack up the final slide for me. So just another one we're having, and again, this is just relevant, Windows Server 2016 end of life, as well as SQL 2016 end of life, which is actually in June of this year, whereas Windows Server is up until January of next year. Upcoming webinar, would love to have you guys attend that as well. Make sure we're getting out in front of those security constraints as well, because that will end security updates for that server and those platforms. So with that, appreciate everybody's attendance today, and hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.